Welcome to the special 2018 seasons of the Wealth Standard Podcast, celebrating life, liberty, and property. You are currently listening to Life Season 1.
Hi everyone, how you doing? This is Patrick, and you're listening to the Wealth Standard Podcast. We're on episode 15. It's exciting to come to you for this podcast because this is a special one that I've done every single year for this will be the 8th year. And we're going to put in the show notes this special podcast of the year, which is from the Real Estate Guys Investment Summit at Sea. So as you guys can tell, if you're watching the video on our YouTube channel, you can kind of look toward the backdrop, and we got a pretty awesome view of St. Thomas that's in the Virgin Islands. But this is an investment summit that I've come on for 8 years in a row, and I brought my daughter last year, my middle daughter, and this year my wife and son came with, my 4-year-old, and then also my great friend Gary Pinkerton is here too. You can see him on the video, and it's special because this is an event that I look forward to every year. I mean, it's an event that is somewhat inconvenient just because we all have stuff going on, but it's an event where they bring speakers, and it's in an environment that is very unique to the typical environment that we're in. And it's an environment that really starts to generate energy and generate thoughts from a very similar paradigm, which really makes you think about things that you normally don't think about in a day-to-day routine. So we're going to get into a lot of the things that we've been learning this year, and also Gary, we're going to talk about his past, what he's doing right now, and a book that he co-wrote with a number of reputable authors. And so we're going to get into that, which is very much along the same theme. But this year it's special because, well, last year's have been special on this particular cruise, but this year has been special because one of the keynotes was Robert Kiyosaki again, and his wife Kim came, and there's always a difference, right? When he has come by himself in the past, it's a different dynamic. When he comes with Kim, it's different, and what they talk about, how they reference one another, how they talk about team is really profound. And based on the theme that we have for this season, which is essentially you as your greatest asset, there is nothing more important that comes second than the special people in your life. When it comes to business, it's your team. And he referenced a lot of military. Gary was at the Naval. You went to the Naval Academy, had a very prestigious career in the Navy as a submarine commander, and then worked a few years after that until he retired. So a lot of references to the military versus typical society or in the civilian world. So we're going to get into that as well. But before we kind of dive straight into the podcast and the specific topics, don't forget to go and check out the resources that we put on the website for each episode. Now, in this episode, as I mentioned, we're going to put the past 8 years of podcasts on there. I guess it would be 7 years, but 7 years where we've done the podcast talking about what we've learned, the different themes, and you're going to definitely see, kind of the evolution of, whether it's content or quality or whatever. But I've had I rarely come alone to these, and so I've brought individuals in the past, and I've interviewed people here. And so all of those podcasts will be available on thewealthstandard.com. So make sure you go check that out. Also, it's a newer website, and so there's lots of other nuggets and information on there. And then we're going to be giving away some of Gary's books, and I'll tell you in just a moment how that's going to be possible. You can get one of his books for free. Cool. Okay, Gary. Well, let's do this. So this is your third time, correct?
Third time.
All right,
yeah,
third
not
time.
in a row, but third time.
So third time on the summit. So I want to get your take first because we didn't even really prepare for this.
Yeah.
you're really
I'm
good.
Comfortable with that now.
Yeah, you are, because you're like, you have the preparedness mindset.
Yeah.
And which is somewhat opposite to mine, right? So
yeah.
I know there's been some getting used to when it comes to just doing a lot of this stuff off the cuff. But maybe first start with what you're getting out of this year. You brought Sue this year. You brought Ryan, your 12-year-old son, right? He was 12-year-old last year.
He was 12 then.
Yep. So you brought Ryan last year. I mean, talk to me and talk to the audience about this year and what you're getting out of it thus far.
Yeah. So to talk about this year, I think I have to go back to the beginning, but I won't talk too much about 2012 because that actually leads into the book. It's part of this book, but. So my first time coming was 2012, and that was right after I got my life insurance policy. It was right after I met you and John Stewart, and you both happened to be on that cruise, so that was pretty awesome for me. Same kind of response for a lot of our clients actually that are, meet us for the first time on the cruise or whatever, just have a really close bond, I think, and kind of reinforcement that, man, this community makes a lot of sense and what we're doing makes a lot of sense. And it's certainly inspirational for me to, get that kind of pump from my clients. But so I came on and I was in the reverse role, or the other side of that table, if you will, in 2012. I took a few years off. It was in my original plan to when I was working with Patrick to go on the cruise every year, and it was just life gets in front of you. And I think one of the things about this cruise is that they kind of keep making it longer, and and they go upscale on the ship. And the thing that I've learned from the real estate guys and from others is that when the barrier to entry is high, the quality of what you get out of the experience is the highest. And
absolutely.
What I talk about all the time is that the one scarce resource in the world is your time. And so if you are going to go on a cruise for 6 days that's low end, $399, some kind of investor thing that where you run to the back of the room and buy stuff, you'll learn some stuff. But when you give up 11 days and pay the level that you do to go on this cruise, makes a big difference. I mean, the people that come are just incredible. But yeah, so last year I came with my son, and Robert was there without his wife, without Kim. The first time, though, back to 2012, the entire Rich Dad organization for the first time was there. Yeah. So it's kind of cool to be kind of following. I know Robert's gone, I think, a couple times since when I wasn't there, but this was the first time I think that Kim came back with him. So so it's really neat. But when she comes, you're right, it's a totally different flavor. But it was just great timing. My 3 events have been great timing, but I think I'm on a path to keep going for many years now. But when she comes, it's, like you said, a different flavor, but it's because she brings a lot of value for the women that are here. And they did this amazing partner thing that I've never seen from them.
That was kind of interesting.
There's incredible value.
Yeah.
It was interesting, but then, then they repeated again yesterday.
We'll talk about that in a second too.
Yeah, so I got great value out of it because my wife was here. So this was perfect for having Sue on this trip. Absolutely.
So, it's interesting that this go around, this cruise, and especially the different personalities that are here. They're from people from totally different walks of life, different countries, different nationalities, different socioeconomic. I mean, we had someone that had just sold $100 million hospital, and then we have younger kids that are just kind of figuring out the entrepreneur game. So it's a very wide spectrum. But this year there was a distinct difference between what Robert Kiyosaki has touched on in the past and what he touched on this side. And as I kind of go back and look, the topic, he really did touch on it. It was just different this year. Now, normally what's happened, in all the years that he's come on the summit, there's a book study. And if you go back and listen to the previous years, the book study is profound because of how he does it. Yeah. And we'll get into the actual article in a second, but let's just touch on the actual way in which he does it. Sure. So the book study itself is interesting because when we're reading, and we've read A Case for Gold by Jim Rickards, we read an excerpt out of a really old book, but that focused on the power that petroleum or oil has when it comes to international relationships last year. But what he's trying to get us to do as participants in this study is not interpret what is being said in the words, but to look at the actual words and what is being said, not what we think is being said. And I think that's profound because, we bring a lens to the world in which we interpret pretty much everything that's going on. And whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, those definitions are essentially our making. And so he tries to really hone in on people to get them to focus and talk about and ask questions about what is being said, not what they think, right? And he almost, in the past years, he has literally like ripped people's heads off, like not literal. I'm sorry, I can't say literally, but he would have, right? If he has a very dominating personality where he will yell and scream and curse at people, right, for being belligerent, right, not being open-minded, and that's happened in previous years, right? So it almost happened this year, because the first timers are the ones that always kind of like don't know that it's a lion's den.
I mean, a guy gave him the opportunity, but he didn't take it.
It's a total mousetrap. Like, ooh, cheese, and then like slams. So you have to be, we oftentimes I'll warn people and kind of give them a heads up as to what is going to happen in the article study, and to kind of be prepared for it. But this guy, started to go off on a tangent talking about something that had nothing to do with the actual article. So anyway, that was interesting. But he tries to get you kind of in a closed environment, think about it, read it. There's a big group discussion, but then he gets you into small group discussions, right? So maybe you touch on that and the value of those small group discussions before there's a sharing in big discussions.
Right. Yeah. So he has us read a section and then turn and discuss with your partner, or maybe he'll talk about a little bit of a concept and he'll say turn and discuss with your partner what you just learned. And even last year, so the first time in 2012, it was epic. And I absolutely didn't get, no one in the room understood that what he was really saying was, don't bring your baggage, right? That's what Patrick just said that, hey, don't bring your baggage, your interpretation of what the author's saying, just tell me what the author's saying. So most of us kind of got that, and we warned the new guys. But even last year, I was discussing with someone who's been at this summit many times, but she was just kind of going off and telling this story about her, like how this applied in her life, and I saw Robert go by us, and I was trying to distract, but anyway, in the end, he kind of a little bit of belittling there on that one, but held back. So the point, though, even when you turn to talk to your partner, it's about regurgitating really what was just said in the room, or sometimes if you're coming right off the article, it's just regurgitate what you read. So but
what's the value in that? Like, what do you when you talk about it? Okay, what is the distinguishing factor between that and reading?
Sure. So those of you that have read Robert's books, he talks very often about the cone of learning, and so when you read something, you get some value of it. I won't do the percentages. I'm sure you know them, but I don't. But when you actually physically talk about something, you speak about it, it's much higher, and then when you physically do it in simulation, substantially higher. I won't go too far down a sidetrack here, but when we're preparing for something on a nuclear submarine, like we're taking the plant to criticality the first time, or we're preparing to go through a dangerous channel or something, we'll do that same level. It's amazing when I saw Robert Kiyosaki talk about it. It's something I've been doing for 20 years, but not in my personal life and not in my business, which was pretty valuable. So you would study it first, and you take a written exam on it, and then you have to explain it orally to someone, and then eventually the whole crew does it. We go through it in simulation.
Well, that's what happened this morning when I was getting some breakfast. I was on the fifth floor of the boat, and all these guys go by in like full fire gear,
Okay.
And they had their tanks on, they had their masks on. I'm like, what's going on? They were doing drills, right? They were doing the physical thing. So when you read something, there's only so much that registers, or it's less than 10%. When you actually talk about it and have an exchange or discussion or teach it, okay, an even higher amount of retention, and then the actual physical act of doing it is where there is, a much higher, multiple times higher as far as the retention is concerned.
And it's not just that there's different types and more effective levels of learning as you go up that pyramid, but it's also that you're repeating, right? So repetition, even if you just chose the same method, read something 3 times, that's a ton better than reading it 1 time.
So this go around, it was very different. In the past, we've done articles that have been financial, or at least financial system oriented, with different asset class. Like I mentioned, we had a discussion on gold one year and read the first couple of chapters of News Case for Gold by Jim Rickards. I can't remember what we discussed in 2012. That was too long ago. But then last year we talked about oil, and it's one of those things where they're topics that people know some some about, some information about, but really to the extent of what he wanted to get is find an expert, right, and understand the expert's perspective and read and understand and learn from what they're saying, not what our understanding of it is, right, which I think is, that isn't learning, right? When you have when your mindset is interpreting something, right, you're basically trying to validate what you already know, right? And it's very difficult to actually take the information and add to what you already have without having an open mind. And the way in which you have an open mind is to read it, right, without a bias, which is hard, very hard. But this year, what was interesting, it wasn't a financial topic, right?
So one other thing on that topic real quick was that it was part of the mousetrap you said. It was also a trap to bring those topics, right? Because we all knew and cared a lot about those topics, and so it was real simple for us to just bring in our opinion, like, oh, I can't wait to be the one to talk about this. And all the rookies, we'd raise our hand, right? But this topic was not that way. I mean, like, I think if last year or in 2012, you know, the topic had been on brain surgery, we would have missed his point, realized what baggage we were bringing, because we would have just physically read, because we didn't have any, you know, context or opinion, was worse.
So the article this year was an introduction to a meditation type of practice called HoloSync. I think that's how you pronounce it. And basically it discussed the importance of meditation, but it did so in a way that I had never really thought about before. Okay. And Kiyosaki started to bring up context in regards to, you know, the left and the right side of the brain, right? The left side being more analytical and black and white, and the right side being more creative and colorful, as he explained it, right? Then you have your subconscious. And the HoloSync idea is essentially bringing into balance, right, those two hemispheres. And I'll talk about that in just a second. But the introduction to HoloSync, right, it went through the fact that, you know, the idea of life and existence is, and it really has no, you know, bad to it. It's all in a sense the way that it is, and good. What makes it, you know, good, bad, happy, pleasurable, painful, is our interpretation of it. And our interpretation of it is typically a function of everything that we have gone through in the past, the stories we've told ourselves, the experience that we've had, good, bad, or indifferent. That's just the way that it is. And everybody brings a different perspective to our current state of reality. And I think it was important for Robert, because I picked up on something. I don't know if you got this, but I picked up on something that really helped me understand what he's seeking. And the experiences that he's gone through in his life, whether it's the military, whether I really picked up on the fact that his father losing that gubernatorial race in Hawaii massively impacted him. Where the corruption, you know, the supposed corruption, the politics of Hawaii were so that when his father ran for governor of the state, he lost, but the fact that he ran against a very, I would say, ingrained politician in, you know, the political landscape there, so profound that his father never got a job again. And basically the guy that did one said that he would never have a position of significance there. And so I look at that experience, I look at, you know, his military experience, and he saw his father fail. He saw the experience he had in school, being a C student, not having a good experience. And I think he's just been asking the question, why do they think that way? Why? Not to say that it's good or bad, right? It's why are they thinking that way? Why are things that way? Why is society that way? And he's helped us, I would say, in this this summit particularly, is to understand that the way in which our society works today is teaching individuals and continually reinforcing the individual, right? And that individuals should work, study, and do by themselves, right? Without a team, without a unit, by themselves. That's how the school system works. Okay, it's how the professional environment works. It's how politics work. And if you think about it, I never even thought about the political side of things, but all the political issues we're having right now, there are individuals that grew up in academia, there are individuals that grew up in, you know, just the typical school system and work environment, and they took all of that training and conditioning to the political landscape, right? And they're trying to be individuals, but are supposed to be working in groups, which was the intention behind, the entire Republican idea of government, which was based on our, founding fathers. So it's interesting that it applies to a lot of different aspects of society these days. But he went in and really had this profound experience in military where he learned how they work in teams. And he gave a number of examples. One particular that I'm remembering right now is, you essentially have a squadron of, whether it's airplanes or helicopters or whatever, that fly in groups, right? But whereas civilians are trained to fly as an individual or singularly, okay? And then he gave examples, of the one pilot where he essentially, flew above, right? Because he got really scared and he got totally taken out, and a lot of people died because of that. Okay, so basically the idea that we are trained to look at the world as an individual, and we essentially have to look out for ourselves, and everything should be done because of us and our singular role, not necessarily as a team. That's how we're trained and conditioned. And he talked about how destructive that was. It became this dog eat dog, zero sum game where you had to be all encompassing smart or nothing at all, which is just, in my opinion, that's not it's not reasonable, okay? But you really see the effects of that mentality in our society, okay, and how it's affected politics, how it's affected the professional landscape, how it's affected academia, and how it's affected business, right? So as we went through HoloSync, the idea was, everything is as it is. It's our interpretation of it. But the more that you're able to, and this walks you through a meditation exercise, but the more you're able to get your mindset in a specific wave pattern, right? A brain wave pattern that's measurable, okay, you start to eliminate a lot of that singular bias. And you start to understand, the principles of relationship, the principles of love, the principles of, things are the way that they are, and it's okay. And I'll give an example, and then I'll pass the baton to you. But I saw this as we were in line for the cruise ship, right? And where there were these two lines, and then there was one that was like VIP, and then one was just a regular line. But the regular line, there was no line. So this lady, kind of got in front, and then some woman went to her and says, "You're in the wrong. You have to get in line." And she's like, and they just had this huge argument, right? And because basically she thought she was cutting, right? And we all have that, right? Where somebody cuts in line, or cuts us off on the freeway. But what's the mental process that causes us to act like that? It's that individual thing that I was talking about, right? Where it's basically like, it's my life and it's my time, and I've been waiting here and they haven't, and I deserve to go first because I have been doing this, that, or the other. It doesn't really, in the end, it doesn't really matter. But society has been trained to think of ourselves as just this individual, and all that's important is us, right? And so that's a small example, but I've thought through just how individuals interpret the way things are, and because it's a singular mentality, there is so much that's missed. Right? It's financial opportunities, it's job opportunities, it's relationship opportunities, where if we just had that mindset, we're able to essentially capitalize on new partnerships, new wealth building opportunities, something. But I think people miss that, right? Because they're always just thinking out for themselves, looking out for themselves, right? Does that make sense?
Right.
All right. Yeah. So that's the HoloSync article is profound, right? And and it's a free PDF. You just look up, maybe we can put a link in the show notes, but it's like HoloSync PDF, but it's a profound article, right? And it was interesting that he had us read that. But I would say the purpose, there's some nuggets in that article that talk about what I just mentioned, which is basically, the more in harmony left brain and right brain are based on these, essentially putting your brain waves in certain patterns, okay, you're able to understand life at a different level and see things that are there right now, but you're just not seeing them. Does that make sense? Right? You're not intuitive to that level. So I thought it was profound. I mean, it was like, it helped me really think about a ton, and it's still making me think about it. Okay? But I'd love your opinion, because you obviously, with your career, I mean, you went to the Naval Academy, right?
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where you went to the typical school system, you graduated, and then got into, you know, a prestigious academy. So it's a transition period, because you go to an academy, and even though you're in school in a sense, you're being trained to work as a leader.
Right.
Okay. So I'd love to hear kind of your take on everything that we've been learning from your lens, right? Which is definitely a different lens than mine.
Yeah. So so it's a very left brain organization. You know, it's very rigid, which is interesting that Robert Kiyosaki was making. Initially, it was hard for me to understand, why is he making the connection between the military. So he would kind of flip back and forth, which was fascinating. He would say, you know, I grew up in the military, where, you know, it's yes sir, you know, you do everything very rigid. That's not creative, right? That's not right brain. And then he would say, we do everything as a team. You know, the current U.S. School system for 100 years has been, you know, you're an individual. If you get help from somebody else, you're cheating. And then he would reinforce the benefits of that by doing that, you know, talk to your partner thing, which was really, really cool. But then he would say, he'd get back to, you know, like on Rich Dad, we do everything exactly the same. If you've ever seen a Rich Dad presentation, you know that, you know, they have the flip chart, and they use the same black, green, blue, and red pens, and they have to take, you know, it was really fascinating, some of the stuff he taught us about, you know, just some nuggets about how to get messages across to people. I mean, I thought that was just amazing about, you know, if you're gonna bring up a concept, put a picture to it, because people will remember the picture. I thought that was fascinating. It's how we teach a paradigm, but I never really made the connection about why that's so effective, I guess, and bringing color to things like that too, to help engage the creative side of the brain. But I think really what he was saying about the rigid aspect of it is more, you know, it does support the team. Really, it's not just left brain. It helps you kind of try to stimulate the right brain. You know, and when you're working with a team and you're asking, like, so what did you hear? What do you think? You are actually you're preventing groupthink, and you're getting perspectives that are not yours. So often people make mistakes.
You're facilitating groupthink. You're not preventing it. You said preventing.
Well, what I mean by groupthink is that a bunch of yes men. That's what I meant.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, so like brainstorming is amazing. Getting opinions and input from people that are not exactly like you is absolutely important, right? I mean, you had one of your advisors recently walk around the company and say, "You want to make your company better?" You know, they gave a suggestion to you, right? Like bring people who are not exactly like you. Hire women, right? So. You know, not group mentality where everybody is just a yes person and saying exactly the same thing, but rather outside opinions that you perhaps haven't thought of. You know, I think that's tremendous. And you were talking about, so the individual getting out of line, right? I mean, that's a huge topic that I could talk for hours on, but that also brings in scarcity versus abundance. It brings in the concept that, you know, everybody thinks that massing a pile of money and massing a bunch of possessions and having more than the Joneses, you know, and your audience is probably, I mean, our audience is not like that, but still, we still do get upset when somebody cuts us off on the freeway, right? Or when somebody passes you in line, and it's because you focus everything on you. And I don't think you can get beyond that with just the left brain, or even maybe just the right brain. So it was really profound for me when he talked about, you know, kind of combining those aspects. But you know, people who are successful in life and in the world and are happy are people who aren't focusing on themselves. You know, I did that in a talk that you heard recently where you know, I was showing pictures of the most successful and most like content people on earth, and you know, Mahatma Gandhi and Mother Teresa, and, you know, those people didn't have external wealth that they put in their garage or a bank account. They had wealth by sharing things to others, you know, the abundance mentality, right? So anyone who is, you know, I think is inwardly focused, like focus on me and I'm going to get something at the expense of someone else is very scarcity mindset.
There's always going to be an ending to that.
And there's no way to ever win that, right? There's always somebody who's got farther up the ladder, has a higher pile.
It's zero-sum game. You win at somebody else's expense.
Right.
All right, so talk about this though, because he didn't bring this up, you know, this go around, right? But he did bring in military into it. He talked about group. He did, you know, bring up essentially, you know, the benefits of working in a team.
Yeah.
But he didn't bring up the objective of the team, right? The mission side of it. What is the objective? The value system in which people operate, right? And also the vision behind it. Where are we going? So you have a mission, like what is our purpose, and then the vision is what's our path? Where are we going? And I think that he didn't bring that up, but I think he was making those statements with the understanding that the team had that, all agreed on that. Yeah. They all agreed, these are the values in which I live my life or I operate myself, and this is the mission I'm on with you, and here's the vision of where we're going, right? And going to, when he was in Vietnam, where the helicopters flew in, as a unit, as a squadron, when one deviated, the squadron had the understanding that the mission was the same. Everybody was on the same mission. Right. They had the same vision. They understood the principles and values that they flew their aircraft by. This guy deviated, died. A bunch of people died along with him. Nobody ever trusted him again. So it's one of those things where, there's, as an individual, you're exposed, and no wonder people feel so protective, right? And they're so like, don't cut me in line, right? Or they flip somebody off on the freeway, right? I totally did that on camera, but I flip somebody off on on the freeway. I can see that, but as you're working in a unit where there's someone there that has your back, that believes as you believe, right? May have a different skill set than you, but is on the same path. And as much as you value them, they value you. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
So maybe integrate that into your experience with a really important leadership position in the Navy.
Sure. So it really gets back to focusing outward. It's really very similar to that. So as I was finishing my career, I was teaching ethics at the Naval Academy, and it's really interesting subjects like leadership and ethics, because you are engaging a side of the brain. And it's a very technical school that we go to there. Everyone comes out with a Bachelor of Science degree, and most of them are engineers and scientists. But then we take you to leadership and ethics courses like I was teaching, and we talk about things like, okay, what if you had to disobey a law, or rule? Or an order? What if is it moral to go take this action? If you're in command of your ship and there's people, one of the really historic ones that we talk about is, there are some refugees on a boat that you come across while you're on your way to a mission. And is it the right answer to leave those people? Do you throw them some water? Do you bring them on board your ship? They could damage your mission. They could prevent it from happening, right? So some really tough questions, but those don't go over very well left brain only. So, but yet we don't know to teach this that was in the Holosync. And it would be very helpful if we did. Like if we had the midshipmen actually meditate for a while, learn how to do that, so that they could, if I knew as a captain of my submarine when there were tough questions, one of the challenging things about command is that there's no one, especially when you're not in communications, there's no one to turn to. Like everyone turns to you eventually. You try to tell them, make the decision, make a recommendation to me. But in the end, eventually you're like, hey, there's no one back there. So, but if you had the ability to go into your stateroom and go through this process and then come out with a clear answer, because I haven't started the process of Holosync or just improving my meditation. I do some, but I think until you get into that delta phase, right, or at least theta, where your brain gets in a much more calm state and you're able to let both sides of the picture come out. Because in my kind of basic way of explaining the left brain and right brain, you've got you got one that's more analytical, one that's more creative, but really you're seeing half the picture. So if you've ever tried to watch a movie without the sound, or listen to something without the video, or a 2-channel audio recording and you're only hearing one side of it, it's really hard to figure out really what's going on, right? So that's what a lot of us do. But if you get to this point where you can put them both together, I think the answers become much more clear. Yep. So very frequently, the team aspect absolutely applies. Really the big thing about team aspect in the military is backup. It's like everyone has a role, and if their role is not performed, especially in a Navy environment on a big ship, I had 150 crew members, and there was always 25 or so that were on watch, and any one of those guys not doing his job could get us in big time trouble. Now we have a lot of backup. We have people kind of overseeing and checking up on each other.
Contingency plans.
But one person could bring the whole team down.
Yeah.
So and that's just a little bit of a flip on the side of Marines and we leave no one behind, right? So often that's one guy putting his life in danger to go get a fallen comrade. Mm-hmm. It's kind of the opposite of everyone is needed to make the thing execute. In that case, you got one guy doing it, but still it's team, right? But I think the reason we don't leave anybody behind is because we have the confidence to go do amazing things. It's interesting, the World War II studies, right, on why do people fight, and they repeated those in Vietnam. The majority of the reason that people fight was for the person next to them in the foxhole that they didn't know before they got to that unit, right? It's not, everyone thought it was from my family back home, and it's not. It's for the guy, it's the team member, that we've kind of created. So.
Well, that's profound, and we could probably use that as an entire topic, because you're totally right. It's the actual military itself. When you are in that type of environment, okay, you're building kind of a collective trust, right? That's based on a preconceived set of values, mission, vision, and so forth, right? So that when you did find yourself in that environment with somebody that you weren't familiar with, but you were on the same team, okay, you didn't tuck tail and run, which is definitely the individual instinct, right?
Right. All right. Exactly.
All right. So let's do this. I want to talk about the whole like be do have thing quick, right? And then let's segue to your book.
Cool.
And I think that should be it.
Pretty good. Yeah, a lot of knowledge there.
For sure. All right. So be do have. This is really, a lot of this is interesting because there's actually a section of the one of the values of Paradigm, right, which is the primary company that we're a part of, is be do have. That's one of our values, and what we mean by that, which kind of plays into this, because Kiyosaki talked extensively about the be do have principle, which is have as results, right? Have is what comes after behavior, right? When you do something, you have results. Results just don't happen in and of themselves. Something has to happen. And when it comes to a human being, behavior is initiated by something. And typically it's your habits, it's your subconscious, it's the programming, good, bad, or indifferent, that you've gone through, pretty much your whole life. And so individuals always want different results. I think we're compelled to progress. We're compelled to have more, to do more, to be more, but yet we find ourselves in this kind of like, wanting to circumvent mentality, which is, well, if I had that, then I would be happy, or if I had this, or if I didn't have that situation, right, I would then have these results, right?
Right.
And that's not, that is a backwards way of thinking, and it never actually happens. Well, I guess it's probably sometimes does, but it's complete luck. But the idea in the end is if you are compelled, which I assume you are because you're listening to podcasts, if you're compelled to progress, if you're compelled to do more, and the results that you have are not, you're not happy with them or content with them, then instead of looking at new results, you look at new being, right? Being somebody that's different. Now, how do you do that? I would say it first comes down to what we've been talking about, right? Which is the way in which things exist right now is good. And what you've done up to this point has produced these results. So it comes down to, essentially learning more, being more, whether it's through study, whether it's through mentorship, whether it's through certification, reading books, going to events. That basically will expand this idea of being, right, where you know more, you understand more, and you can essentially provide more value, which is the doing side of things. And as you do more, then you will have more. But the idea of this hollow sync, what's awesome is that, as Gary was mentioning, it does kind of balance out that analytical black and white left brain side of things with the right brain, which is very colorful. And that type of balance allows you to look at all of the world and your opportunities much differently. And you're able, as I mentioned before, pick up on things that you didn't pick up on previously. And so, the whole be do have, I'll let you comment on a second. What I would say, in the end is, the connection I made was the idea of meditation. With meditation, I've done it for a number of years, and it's very difficult for me because my mind is always, thinking about stuff. But it's very difficult, right? And that is the beta side of the brain, where it's just like, think tons of stuff is going through your mind. Okay, and that really is what creates the habits, because most of those thoughts are the same as the thoughts from yesterday, right? So the idea is, getting yourself into, alpha, and getting yourself into theta, and then delta. Like those brain waves, essentially, calm yourself and expand, your mindset, tapping into, more of the subconscious. So we won't get deep into that, but I think the idea behind meditation that I took from, reading and studying this article and thinking about it, right, is that it basically basically puts your mindset in, in this, you put a set of glasses on that you're now seeing more opportunities. You're seeing the value in others. You're not quickly responding to things that you think are wrong, or if somebody wronged you, you're not, wanting to, inflict revenge on them. You're in a state of mind where things are right, and it's okay and it's good, right, as opposed to taking all of your baggage, putting those glasses on, and being, vindictive, and the world sucks and I suck and nothing ever goes my way and I'm never lucky and everything always happens to others, and that vicious cycle. So that's kind of the last thing I took from it. So I'll let you
Be Do Have
address on Be Do Have, and then we'll get into your new book.
Awesome. So I love Be Do Have concept, and using their colors. Robert yesterday wrote be in blue, and then do in red, and then have in blue again. I don't know if that was on purpose, but one of the things that Tom Wheelwright always does is he writes behave above that. So he just takes the be and the haves and puts them together.
Cool.
Which I think is pretty cool. And the do was in a different color, so you could see be and have there together too, like behave. But kind of the point for that in a very simple example is, why does Gary Pinkerton never win the lottery? Well, one thing is I didn't do something that was necessary. I didn't buy a ticket, right? Yeah. So that would be helpful. If you at least do, then you might have. But often that's just pure chance, right? So we all know people who did. They did the do part. They bought a ticket, and they randomly, won the lottery. And then they're a wealthy person, right? But they don't stay a wealthy person. And why? Is because they didn't become a wealthy person, right? And so that's one of the things that Robert Kiyosaki and his team always talk about, is that you have to become a different person. Mm-hmm. So if they don't be before they do, like buy the ticket, then when they have, they won't keep it, right? So it's just kind of a very simple example of that. But for me, Be Do Have is, again, it's about adding value. Like one of the things you said when we were talking about Cash Flow 101 a few months ago, for me it was inspirational, but you were talking about that outer ring of Cash Flow 101 and the fast track, and why, I don't remember, I won't go all the way down that path, but what you were talking about was that you have to, you were talking about money, and you said, the other side of money is adding value. So really money, the amount of money you have, the amount of money you make is just a representation of the value you've added to others. And I thought that was pretty awesome, mm-hmm. right? So like currency, like what is this green stuff? You added some value today, you got some money in your wallet, right? Now that's not always true, right? I mean, a guy who robs a bank, kills 3 people, and takes all the money, he kind of stole it. So there's the other side where you could steal it. Mm-hmm. But in general, long term, if you continue to earn money. I mean, Robert Kiyosaki for 21 years has been earning money because people buy Rich Dad Poor Dad. He continues to add value to new people, right? So when you become something different, then you have money in that case. When you're a very giving, caring, thoughtful individual, you have friends, right? So I just think Be Do Have it's kind of the starting point that mm-hmm. most of us don't really think too much about. But again, it's outwardly focused and it's abundant focused, which I just love.
Yep, I totally agree with that. Yeah, it's one of those. It's been taught by a lot of personal development people. I mean, this is probably not new to you. Kiyosaki is definitely not the first person that came up with the idea or talks about the idea or teaches the idea. But because it's been used by so many people, that's a clue, and I think that's a clue to say, wow, if you do want different results, which that's a rhetorical question, because you do, just like everybody else, because all humans are compelled for different results. It's how do you become a different person? Now, it's not, I don't want to change who I am. It's not that, right? It's how do you improve upon your skills, your attributes, your abilities to essentially create more value for others. And I think the teamwork side of it is huge, because once you pick up on how you can create more value for others, it's typically because of some strength, some ability, some attribute that you have that you're not spending enough time on. Yeah. Well, if you want to spend more time on it, then you probably have to give up some things that you're spending time on, which means you need to incorporate other people on your team to perform that type of task, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Let's get into your book, right? Because I know we don't have forever on this, but you just wrote this book, The One Thing That Changed Everything, and it's with I think about a dozen authors or so, 10 authors,
26
authors. Okay, yeah. Wow, that's a lot. And it's fascinating because again, this was obviously written well before we came on this cruise, right? But it's everybody talking about the same thing, coming from different perspectives and different backgrounds, different stories, and so forth. And it's cool because they're just little short stories, right? And it's not this, you're not learning about one person over and over and over and over and over and over again, their perspective or opinion on things, right? You're learning about one thing from 26 different perspectives. So it's kind of cool. So why don't you tell us about, the book, some of the things that are in there, what the title means, and then we'll get into how people can get a copy.
Right, awesome. So Patrick's writing a book too, which will be out here soon. But so this was my first, one that was physically published. I did an ebook, and I've, but my portion really wasn't much bigger than a lot of term papers I've written or letters that I used to have to write as commanding officer to the head of our nuclear power training program and every month. So this wasn't much bigger than that, but it was soul searching, right? So, and actually what I learned was that the process of taking what was originally 20-some pages when I was done with it down to like 6 or 8 was really hard. You're thinking like, is that really an important part of the story? Like one of these 2 paragraphs has got to come out. Which one is really my message? So if you ever have to go through an exercise where, think about, my coach gave me, awesome coach, gave me an exercise one time a few months ago that when you come back next week, pretend that you have been standing on a mountaintop and you had to tell thousands of people what's important in life, and you only have 1 minute to do it. That was hard. That was really hard. So, but I learned a lot. And so writing this book was very similar to that. And there are so many inspiring stories. And I think the most important thing in here, there's great lessons in this book, but just like, Robert Kiyosaki, Teach and Be Do Have, or Jim Rohn's stuff, I mean, they got those from other people. They distilled down the most important stuff. Someone famous said there's nothing new under the sun, right? So you'll have learned these lessons before, but these are people that I've met, people that you've probably met or heard of, and their story is humbling because you realize, gosh, that's no different than what I went through. But also, maybe it's just a reminder. But there's a lot of men who are really emotional, and they really kind of inspire you or touch you to kind of do better. So my story, talk about that real quick. Yeah. So mine started, as I was saying at the beginning of this one, in 2012 on the Real Estate Guys Summit. So I just finished up command of the U.S.S. Tucson. I was kind of searching for where I was, what I was going to do next, because for many years that was my goal, is to command a submarine crew, and it was wildly successful in the end. Eventually, it was a little rough at the beginning, but we did it, and I was transferred off the ship, and I was just kind of searching, and I knew I wanted to be in real estate. I knew I really liked personal finance, but I knew there's just some things out there that I was not interpreting correctly. I didn't have the right color glasses on.
But that's not the typical. I mean, that is not what the typical commander in your position is seeking, right? And you had tons of opportunities being a government contractor, living in, Arlington, Virginia, or wherever in Virginia, right? And on that belt, being able to get a very healthy 6-figure income just being a contractor, right?
Right, yeah, we go way down that path if we want to. So I would just move to the Pentagon, and I was working on an incredible staff. I mean, I was very lucky to be on the Joint Chiefs staff. I mean, it was just really inspiring. I was working with some amazing, amazing heroes. But I was also deep into a machine of 25,000 people going to work every day, and a lot of them were kind of just sustaining the machine, right? And one of the fascinating things that one of my mentors taught me was that every government organization or every organization out there, group of people, company, whatever, their first and foremost job is self-preservation, just like an animal. Like, what's that cat's job? The cat's job is survival, right?
Eat mouse, survive.
So every time you hear the president or you hear the Department of Defense, the chairman say, we have created a new organization, we'll call it the TS or the TSA. We've created the TSA. Well, now we've got an organization whose job it is every day, the primal level is to, keep the organization going. I'm sorry, I wasn't going to go down the path too far. So here I am in 2012. And I'm standing outside the dining hall one evening with Robert Kiyosaki, and I had read some old stuff that he did about talking about how everybody is a genius at something, and it was his early days of railing on the school system, and he said that the reason that most people come out of school like I did, thinking that I was dumb, this is him speaking, is because I didn't fit in the mold of academic genius, intellectual quotient. He's like, there's a lot of IQs, not just academic IQ, and that really. As I thought about a lot of people that I had followed and thought were amazing geniuses, they weren't necessarily academic experts, but they were great leaders, and they were great at what they did. And so I continued after a couple years after that to meet people like that. I'd also just read Atlas Shrugged at the time. I'd just met G. Edward Griffin after, so it was kind of a busy study book.
Creature of Jekyll Island, Atlas Shrugged, and Kiyosaki, like while you're working at the Pentagon.
Yeah. So this book is about how those interactions in 2012 changed me. And to cut the long story short, working with my coach, I figured out what I want to do for the rest of my life, and that is to help people get on a not necessarily just entrepreneurial path, but on a path where they add value to the world, right? I'm like you. I don't believe in prosperity economics movement. I don't believe everyone in that group. We don't really believe in retirement, and because that means to back away. And one of the awesome things that Robert Kiyosaki said in his last episode yesterday with us was, people who retire, they live an average life expectancy of like 3 to 5 years. And he was very spiritual on this one, and he talked about God a lot. He called it like the general overall director, just to kind of be more inclusive. Yeah. Right? But he was like, if you decide that you're going to chase a little white ball around the pretty little lawn, for 2 or 3 years, God, he said, kind of figures that out and decides, well, I don't need you either anymore. So you go away. So I thought that was kind of interesting. But my point is, that I want people to try to add value to the world, right? And so Atlas Shrugged actually kind of comes back in this, and there's Galt's Gulch, and John Galt has this little secret society of people that all want to add value, and so that's what I'm going to do, is somehow create Gary's Gulch, or Galt's Gulch.
Gary's Gulch. I like it.
And then
hopefully
Puerto Rico.
It's a beach. And it's warm, because I'll come visit all the time.
Yeah, it might be Puerto Rico after that fun visit yesterday.
Yeah, that was cool. Yeah, we were on Puerto Rico as part of the stop. All right, well, let's talk about, so the book, the theme is the one thing that changed everything. So maybe address that, and then we're going to give out 5 of these, and for free, and I'll tell you how we'll do that in just a second. So what are some of the one thing that changed everything? What was Kyle Wilson, who kind of orchestrated this whole book?
Sure.
What did Kyle kind of approach you with and say, Gary, this is the title of the book. This is what I want you to write about.
So he really left it up to us, which was amazing that 26 people got together and wrote powerful stories. They did edit them, and they helped us reduce them down and say, as I think about your message, do you think that section, that part of the story is as important as this part of the story? So they'd give a little bit of nudging, but in the end, if there's some that are 3 times as long as mine in this book, because those individuals thought that that every aspect of it applied. I might have cut mine down too far for people, I might have taken a little bit of context out of it. But I'm a type A person, and they challenged me to make it shorter, so I made it shorter. But, so for me, the one thing that changed everything was learning the lessons of prudent financial, learning prudent financial lessons. And so thinking back through my experiences, I grew up on a dairy farm, and it was high interest rate world, and we had 2 advisors. One was a banker, and one was a life insurance guy, and it turns out not the way we thought it was going to turn out. I mean, we lost the farm because the banker kept making some recommendations that weren't really very good. The people who were going to buy the house from us put their money in the stock market for 2 months, by the way. The first people who were going to buy it, because they want to get a little bump, a little bit extra from the Bitcoin, right? And then when it was time, it had come down 25%, and they lost everything, and we didn't sell to them. Jeez. And so the lessons like that keep happening. But the other part of my lesson in here, the one thing for me was that is what we've talked about already. It's about abundance. It's about seeking where you feel that you can add the most value. But I talk about what we do at Paradigm Life with, I believe that everyone in Gary's Gulch, should be seeking their own unique genius. They should only be focusing on what they're better at than everyone else, because it inspires them to do it. It's those activities. It might be basket weaving, but it's that activity where you lose yourself in time. Like, you don't even realize, I just spent 2 days doing this, right? So, but people can't focus on that if they're focused on not living under an overpass. So if they don't have things in place like insurance, like health insurance or life insurance or car insurance, they could have one bad day, and they've destroyed the family's abilities to not live under an overpass. So, we help people put that in place, and then we help people figure out how to do passive income. What is that? We've got a dozen things that I'm proud to say we offer, where you can have money come in while you're sleeping. And then when that's out of the way, your family is not going to live under an overpass. You're going to have health care if you have a problem, and then you're going to have passive income, so you can stop being on the treadmill so often. maybe not all at once, but you can start to focus on things that inspire you. You can start to go to school and improve, master that skill that you're really good at, so that you can focus on that thing. So that's really, for me, like, I'm trying to push people to unique genius is what I think we're doing at Paradigm.
And I think that's, you know, it's one of those, it's not a black and white thing, right? It's like, you know, we've been trained and conditioned, and really our perspective of the world is we have to do these kind of this regiment, this first, this second, this third, this fourth, this fifth, right? And part of that, toward the end, the finish line that makes it all worth it, right, is this mythical, you know, status of not having to work again.
Yeah.
And that's the difficulty, right? Because getting a person to actually reprogram themselves, right, to a mentality where they're going to work forever, but they're going to do it with something that they love, do it with something that's going to, you know, elongate their, you know, their life expectancy. You know, it's going to
take a while to get that.
It's a challenge, yeah. But I would say it's one of those things where I really believe that, you know, the world is really showing how abundant it really is, whether it's the technological advances that are going on, whether it's our ability to communicate, whether it's, you know, people being able to do a book very easy, you know, not easily, but easier than in the past.
Yeah.
With, you know, Granham's, like, you know, type press. That, you don't have to, like, press a page and then press and set all the little words and then press another page. You know, that was the book process previously, right? Now, you know, it's much simpler to actually, you know, get a book out there, get thoughts out there that will empower and inspire people, right? But I think the world is kind of gravitating toward that. Wow, this is an amazing experience. This is how, you know, we can actually find something that we can become very wealthy at, but also love doing, which is, I would say, like the new, that new finish line, which is kind of like the infinite finish line.
Right.
You get there, but it's kind of like it never ends. Right.
Right.
Cool. All right, everyone. Well, this is how you get the book. So, with podcasting, I love doing it, and it really inspires me, and I love interviewing guests. Hopefully, you guys get a lot of value out of it. I want to touch more people, and the way in which we do that is by sharing it. And there are these tech companies called Apple and Google, you know, and they have all these different, you know, equations to rank and to, you know, to get us, you know, get more exposure to it. So if you got the one of those main things you can do is a review, a positive review, and doing a positive review, sharing it, getting more people to subscribe, that helps, you know, expand it. So we're gonna do 5 of these books, and all you have to do is give us a really good review on Apple, take a picture of it, and send it to podcast@paradigmlife.net. But you can also, if you've already done that, you can essentially take this episode and then share it with your, you know, your Facebook audience or your Twitter audience. And if you take a snapshot of that, we'll also send this this book to you. So if you guys can do that, email us at podcast@paradigmlife.net. We will make it happen.
Man, I was humbled to have you for you to have me on this one. So
this was
That's
yeah.
cool.
I love you. No one better to have on this. All right, everyone. Thank you very much. We got a couple episodes left of this season called Life, and we really appreciate your support and for listening and or watching. And we'll talk to you next time.
Thank you for joining us as the Wealth Standard Podcast spends all of 2018 celebrating life, liberty, and property. Be sure to leave us a review on iTunes, and we'll see you on the next one.